Welcome into the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast, the place where all we have to decide is what to do with our Wednesday evenings. And we always decide to watch AEW Dynamite. And we got a lot of AEW to talk today because, of course, Blood and Guts coming up next week. And we got all kinds of other stuff after a fantastic episode. I am Griff from GA. Joining me again is Anthony from Down Under and Sergi, both from the Pro Wrestling Musings website. Both do fantastic work over there, and both of them will be talking about the fantastic work they have been doing recently. So, this is the go-home show to Blood and Guts, and of course we're going to talk all about that. However, I want to start here. Darby Allin main events AEW now for the third consecutive week, taking on Preston Vance with the TNT title on the line. I thought this was a terrific match. I thought each of his previous main events were also really, really good matches. It definitely seems to me like AEW is beginning to trust Darby Allin as one of their most reliable workers. Normally a spot like this would go to the world champion, or you would think. But AEW seems to be their most trustworthy worker on the roster right now. So we'll start with Sergi. Do you think that Darby Allin is now in the position where, AEW just throws him out there and he can have a good match with just about anybody?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the biggest thing about Darby Allin is that they know that he's their future, and they are willing to invest in building that, regardless of whether each given week that means an up or a down. And on the flip side of that, Kenny Omega, their champion, their world champion, is not someone that they want to be main eventing regularly. They are definitely looking at him as someone to save and to make it more of a special event than a weekly event out of. I think that Darby Allin has had a lot of great matches, a lot of great main event matches, but this week he was also up against the President of the United States. And although the ratings are lower overall than the last couple weeks, when we look at the ups and downs, the quarter hours, Darby Allin's main event went up, and they ended the night on a high note for viewers, as opposed to the previous week where they lost some. And I think that's a huge thing. Even though the total rating was a little bit lower, it was growing as leading up to and straight through to that finish.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring up. Anthony, you are someone who talks a lot about the ratings, and we'll get, a lot into the ratings as well as AEW's presence on YouTube a little later, which is something you wrote about over on ProWrestlingMusings.com. So obviously it seems that people do tune in for Darby Allin matches. This one in particular, though, was a little bit different than what we see from him usually. He actually had 60% of the offense in this match. And if you are a regular listener or reader of Pro Wrestling Musings, you know that almost never happens. Darby Allin is almost always behind. So it seems to me that AEW knows that Darby Allin is going to be the draw in that last section of Dynamite, that last quarter of Dynamite, and they continue to put him in very different situations. And to Sergi's point, I think it works really well with the fact that he is TNT champion, the champion of the network. He's the guy who's on all the time. So this particular match, did it work for you?
So just a quick thing, I really am enjoying how they are saying on commentary how many matches in a row he has won, because this week his victory over 10 actually put him over Cody's record of retention, which is something, story-wise, it's just such a little thing, but it's really, really good to see. In terms of where everything's going, I am really not surprised about obviously him fighting a bit more on top, because it's quite last week with Jungle Boy, he seemed to be a lot more aggressive, where he normally plays that baby face of, okay, I'm going to get beat down for a little bit and then I'm going to come back and then win. Where last week I felt very much of, no, he's going for this. He's been a bit more aggressive throughout the entire match, rather than just the aggression towards the end. This week, again, I felt like he was very much more fighting in front, and you can see that with the strikes. 24 strikes from Darby versus 16 from 10. Now, 10's obviously a bigger guy, so in my mind, okay, cool. It's going to take him less strikes to do the same amount of damage as Darby. However,
which we saw in that strike down rate, 44% strike down rate from 10.
Exactly, and I was about to bring that up. But in terms of this one, it just seems like the more damage he's doing, and this is the story that they're trying to tell, that how long can he keep this up? How long can he keep fighting, doing this? And the story here is that the more he's fighting, the more desperate he's becoming, the more offense he's trying to put in early on, or he's trying to maintain that aggression. So I'm not I think it's really good because, this time he's got 60%. Last week against Jungle Boy, I think it was up as well. But next week, I won't be surprised whoever he fought. Actually, no, he's not fighting next week. He'll be fighting the week after. Mm-hmm. Whoever he fights then, it'll probably be up again. And that's the thing where I think we're getting towards the end of his reign. He's got a lot of people coming after him now. Obviously, you had that fantastic segment with Miro where that was so great. And now he's positioned, and I want to see him get a belt. You've obviously got Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page, who have been attacking him regularly, coming after him and attacking him and Sting now. You've got whatever is happening with Lance Archer, whether he's friend or foe. It seems he's a friend at the moment, but is Darby gonna reward him for that friendship with a title match maybe? So I have a feeling that his title reign is coming to an end. So the story is that the more damage and the more intense his fights, he's trying to, now you've seen that aggression. Now I think he is actually changing his style slightly to represent that, which is something great. In terms of booking, he's doing so good. For the numbers, 909,000 people were watching his match with 10, which for the 18 to 49 demo, which was 470,000 people, which was the peak of AEW. That was the most amount of people watching AEW. Actually, no, sorry, second most. The most was during the Inner Circle Pinnacle. But, consecutively, he has been holding this spot and extremely well in that main event, which is something rewarding to see, and it is paying attention. Obviously, AEW paid attention to this stuff. They did the exact same thing when Jericho and Cassidy were on fire in the demos. They'd promote them in their own segments, and this is just them doing the exact same thing. They're very smart about what they're doing. They know what they're doing, especially for this. So, look, he's definitely showing that he can draw. He's shown that he's a star. But I think that we're going to have a title change sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think based on the fact that the commentators did bring up that he has now surpassed Cody in terms of number of successful defenses of that title, it certainly seems like if they're going to mention that, there has to be something for that. You know what I mean? So maybe it's a situation where whoever wins it next is going to also get close to that number, and they're kind of waiting until we can get someone, like the most comparable example would be like Rob Van Dam with the ECW TV title, where he ends up holding that for like 2 years or something. So maybe AEW's, I don't know if they're going to go 2 years, but they're working up to that point where someone is going to hold it for a long time. We know that AEW is okay with doing long title reigns. They've had 3 world champions in their entire history. Their current women's world champion has held the belt for about a year. So we know that AEW is okay with doing long title runs. So maybe that's going to be in the cards for Darby. I think about the ratings, it's really interesting that Darby has become such a draw. I think, and I'm just speculating now, that Darby Allin connects with a lot of people in that 18 to 49 demographic. As someone who works in TV, there's always conversations about, what kind of people are watching the product and how do you cross over, right? That's a word that's constantly used in television. How do you cross over to people who don't watch your product, but who might watch your product? Darby Allin, I think, does speak to a lot of people. whether it's his character or his personality or the way he fights, there is value to the underdog babyface. There's a reason why throughout the history of wrestling, the biggest draws tend to be underdog babyfaces. Hulk Hogan obviously basically invented the idea of doing that. Even Bruno Sammartino did a little bit of the underdog shtick, especially when he was fighting, bigger monster heels. Stone Cold Steve Austin did a little bit. He wasn't underdog in his matches, but in terms of fighting against the McMahon family and kind of the machine of the WWF, John Cena. I mean, Roman Reigns obviously was very unpopular, but he was a draw. He is a star. So I'm not saying that Darby Allin could get to that level. I mean, he might. But the point is that I think people connect with an underdog babyface because they can kind of project themselves into that role. You can kind of, you see yourself as Darby Allin. What would I do in that situation? You know what I mean? Again, this is purely speculation, but I think Darby Allin is a draw. And one thing that I really liked about the way that this match was structured was the fact that Darby Allin, he went for a lot of submissions on Preston Vance, which we tend to see small guys do against big guys, but he went for them on the arm, which I thought was interesting because it's a little play on, normally small guys go for the legs, right? It's a classic trope in wrestling. You try to chop down the redwood, right? That's always what we talk about. Well, Darby Allin went for the arm, and Preston Vance sold the hell out of that thing. To the point where, the kind of wheelbarrow German suplex that he hit was like, you could tell it hurt him. And he was, he was laboring to get Darby up and the full Nelson, he was like kind of fighting through that to lock it on. I really liked that wrinkle of it. I thought it was unique for a big man, little man match. I am surprised to see the match offense the way it is. And the minute by minute graph, pretty much what we expect from a Darby Allin match, I think. So moving on, another match that I thought was really interesting was the Young Bucks versus Matt and Mike Sydal. This was a tag team championship eliminator match, I think they call it. If the Sydals won, they'd get a title shot. Makes a lot of sense to me. One thing that Craig pointed out in his write-up over on ProWrestlingMusings.com is the fact that Matt and Nick Jackson are almost identical in this match. They do almost the exact same stuff throughout the entire match. It's so interesting to me. We'll start with Anthony. I mean, you look at this and it's like, man, this is total tag team synergy. These guys are on the same page and you can see it broken down in the numbers. We're seeing it physically right in front of us. I thought this was amazing. What is it about the Young Bucks? I mean, do you think that this is a trend that's going to continue and how effective do you think this is?
Yeah, look, this one was interesting for me, especially seeing the match offense, that it went the way of the Sydals. Very interesting. The mirror imagery of Matt and Nick is just extremely good to see. Obviously, Craig has changed the way that he's sort of done tag teams, where he's now doing it in an individual. So you get to see person versus person, who's doing the most, who's doing the least. And it's really interesting to see that Matt and Nick are both around the exact same. You can see on their the minute-to-minute graph, you can see that, they're pretty much doing the exact same thing, where Mike and Matt Sydal, they kind of have a very big dip there and a very big increase. I've got to say, I really, really, really popped for the Johnny Cage nut punch. Massive fan of Mortal Kombat. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I understood that reference. That was great. The thing that I think shows here is the strike down rate of 67% versus 57%. Again, very close. But that match offense, the Young Bucks gave them a lot. And that's something that they have done, that, they tend to give these guys a lot, but then they win, and they're winning in a way where they don't need to do this stuff. And I think this is the story. They don't need to do heelish stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
But they do it because they know that it's going to, annoy you, because that's what their characters are playing at the moment. So the double teams, they doubled the double team amount 4-2. Yeah, just generally, I'm surprised to see how much the Sydals actually really got during this match. But it's good to see, because, the Sydals have been used quite heavily. They've had matches now with Kenny, now with the Bucks, you know. So they're being presented as, yes, they're not at their level, but they're fighting at their level now. So they should be meeting these guys and matching these guys or getting close to these guys to represent that. So it's good to see.
I thought this match was good. I didn't think it was quite as good as Matt Sydal versus Kenny Omega from a few weeks ago. But Sergi, when you look at this, it's such an interesting match to me. Not only in terms of the statistics, but in terms of the character that the Bucks were showing. It's like overnight they've gone from, you know, this almost, I want to say almost bland type of matches and characters that they had. I mean, the matches, I just take that back. The matches weren't bland, but their characters kind of were. To now, I mean, it's like they've changed their style and they've totally changed who they are in the ring, and it's like it's so fun to watch for me now. Is that just me, or are you kind of getting this same feeling from them?
No, absolutely. The Young Bucks are entertaining as hell as heels. No question about that. Their fans find them entertaining as hell as babyfaces too, but that act can get old. Within character, and here's the thing that AEW is great at, they try to make sure that everybody has a reason for what they're doing. To me, the Young Bucks behaving in all these heelish ways, outrageously and obviously self-consciously, I think is meant to be seen as just an act of loyalty. They're doing it to show that they're on Kenny's side, to demonstrate, yes, we're on your side. We're completely on your side. We're not having second thoughts. We're not hesitant about it as you may have perceived us as being earlier on.
Right.
So they're doing it on purpose to annoy us, yes, outside of the story, but within the story to prove and show that they're on Super Elite team, you know, for life, as they say.
Yeah, no, you make a really good point, and I think it translates into their style as well. This is a team that, coming into this new heel run, they were probably the most active tag team in terms of how much they did during a match. They were throwing strikes. I think they threw the third most strikes per hour of any team. They're not known as strikers, but they still did. Lots of strike downs. Again, really, really active. Second most dives per hour of any team. They were all over the place during their matches, and it's become kind of a typical Young Bucks match to just see them constantly bounding all over the ring and doing all this crazy stuff. Well, in this match, they both threw fewer strikes than Matt and Mike Sydal. Their strike down rate was still high, so they're keeping that. 2 dives throughout the entire match, and both of them were from Nick Jackson, and that is far below the average of what we expect from them. So, I mean, this character has translated into a changing style for the Bucks, and it's a style that really works because now they're not going for, you know, the cheers from the fans for all the crazy stuff they do. They are going for heat from the fans for just being pricks, and they're so good at it. Like, Matt Jackson just annoys the hell out of you, and Nick Jackson continues to be like, he's annoying, but not in the same way Matt is. He's not as active as Matt, but they still kind of have that thing where, you know that they can turn it on. Like, they'll pull out 1 or 2 moves a match. It's not like a dozen like they used to. It's not like 1 or 2 moves a match where you're like, that's something no other team in the world could even think of doing. And, you know, the Young Bucks can still do it. And then they'll like taunt you about it when they do it. And so I think it's another example of AEW matching what we see in the ring with what we're told the characters are and what the characters say they are. And I think that's such an underrated thing that AEW does that really enhances your viewing enjoyment of a match, but you may not be able to really like quantify it. That's what these stats are so useful for, that we can actually quantify that happening, you know? Yeah,
absolutely. I agree completely. It's nice to look at it and and also notice things that you might not have noticed. I certainly would not have realized just how synchronized the Bucks, Matt and Nick's offense were without Craig pointing it out. It's really interesting.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right about that. When it comes to the entire characters of the Elite, because the Bucks were the ones that had a match this time on this Dynamite, but I think probably the best segment came when Michael Nakazawa was supposed to be fighting Eddie Kingston. I loved this segment. This was so good, and I think it really just encapsulates what this new heel Kenny Omega and this heel group is really about. And it started when they were in the limo and cutting that promo, and Kenny was like, we're not afraid of you. We have all these people that, can rip your heads off or whatever. And then
just hypocrisy.
Yeah, exactly. And then Nakazawa hits the button for the horn, and Kenny's like, "Are they there? Are they here?" I loved that. And then they get to this segment, and Kingston comes out and beats up Nakazawa, puts the chair around his ankle, and I love this exchange where he goes, "I'm gonna break your boy's ankle." And he goes, give me what I want or I'm going to break your boy's ankle. And then Kenny Omega just goes, "So you're telling me you're going to break his ankle?" And Eddie Kingston goes, "Yes, I'm going to break his ankle." I loved that. This group, to me, this is such old school heel stuff. It's because they're fools. They're absolute idiots. And they're cowards, and they just but they're good. Kenny Omega is maybe the best wrestler that ever lived. The Young Bucks are probably the best tag team in the world right now, and the Good Brothers have a shout to be the second best tag team in the world right now. Every one of them are just so good at what they do, but they're idiots and they're cowards, and it's such great heat for me. I understand if kind of the comedy element of it isn't really your thing. If you don't like it when your world champion heel is a moron, I get it. But for me, this is such great heat. It works so well. Sergi, when you look at this team, does this work for you? This kind of idiot comedy style that they seem to be going with? Sergi's just lost for words here, talking about the
sorry.
Did stylings.
I clicked mute instead of unmute. Sorry. I was saying that without anyone hearing me, that I completely agree that the hypocrisy of Kenny Omega is really what makes him booable. That really is what is the heart of what makes him the bad guy.
Yeah.
Whenever he talks about how great he is, nobody doubts him. It's true. The question is, it's the other things that he claims. "We're not scared of you." That we just don't believe you. And it's hilarious when the reality comes through of showing the lie. When he said, "We're not a bit scared of you," I knew a horn was going to start. I just knew, because it was the perfect moment for his lie to show, and it happened like that. 2 seconds later, it's just are they here? Yes, it was a really great moment, and I think that the complete. For example, I remember someone was asking, well, why didn't they ask for a match with Kenny and Don Callis? Make Don Callis get into the ring, or at least be on the side of the ring. He probably wouldn't be willing to take a tag. But my point is, that's a classic of the bad guy and the manager has to get involved because you've got something over him. And it's that's the one thing that he wouldn't have gone for, because he's a coward. He'd give anything for you not to take his golden goose, but he wouldn't risk himself. So it makes sense, They asked for something that they just want to get their hands on those guys. They're not looking for gold. They're not looking for. They just want a little revenge, a little physical revenge for everything that they've been put through. Is all that that Moxley and Kingston are really looking for. And they used the bad guys' hypocrisy and cowardice and avarice against them to get what they wanted. And it was perfect.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what else I loved about this segment, the comedy I thought was great. I mean, I was absolutely rolling on the floor when Kenny Omega said, "So you're telling me you're going to break his ankle?" I absolutely love that. But what they also worked in was this very subtle, the reveal of the darker side of Kenny's character. Because that's the thing about comedy heels. And I wouldn't, they're not comedy, but they are very funny. But the thing about anyone who's funny is they also, if they're going to be your world champion, if they're going to be your top heel, they have to have a dark side. And so Kenny Omega, seeing his best friend, who we've been told since the beginning of AEW that Kenny and Nakazawa have been friends for years, right? I mean, they're best friends. And they fought together before. And so for Kenny to just see his friend about to get his leg broken and just says, he knew what he signed up for. Be my guest. Like, it's that dark side mixed into this segment that was so funny. To me, this is such a great understanding of what makes heels, right? I mean, it's not enough to just tell me that they're a bad guy, to just have them do bad stuff. They have to be bad people. And Kenny Omega comes off as just the worst person imaginable. It's so, I think it's so effective. It's the only word that I can come up with. It just works. What they're trying to make me believe about Kenny Omega, I believe.
Because almost all of the guys are going to have some edge to them. All of the guys are going to do some things that you might call bad. Darby Allin, of course, we see that. But
Right.
Same thing with Moxley. Kingston, just recently was considered a bad guy, and just recently redeemed himself, and still has a very dark side to him. They all have their edge to them, and they're some things that you have to show their character weaknesses, not just that they're violent. If they violently turn on someone, you might say, well, maybe he had it coming. But if they fail to stand up for their friend, then you go, oh, this is the guy I should be rooting against.
That's very well said. Anthony, when you look at this group, man, obviously Sergi and I are both really liking what we're seeing here. What do you think? Is this the kind of heel heat that is effective to you?
Okay. I'm actually going to go on a little bit of a different angle here.
Please do.
This is the beginning of my heel turn. I think I've played a babyface on this podcast for a while, so this is my heel turn.
This is our first heel on the podcast. I'm excited.
All right, so we are effectively 4 episodes of Dynamite away from Double or Nothing. Who's Kenny fighting at Double or Nothing? Who are the Young Bucks fighting at? Who are the Young Bucks fighting at Double or Nothing? Because we're getting
I would hope Pac and Phoenix for the Young Bucks.
Well, why would they? They've just lost and they've beaten them. I'd like to see that as well. But if we have a look at it, okay, so we have 4 episodes of Dynamite. Now, in this last episode, great, we got some progression on Mox and that. Now, Mox and Eddie are gonna beat Kenny and Nakazawa next week because Nakazawa is in that match to eat a pin. That's definitely happening. So with that means that they'll have a victory, which means that it's either going to be Mox or Eddie versus Kenny at Double or Nothing, probably. Now, both of them are Eddie. I don't think it'll be Mox because I'm pretty sure AEW doesn't want to do that again because we've just finish that, hopefully. It is still kind of going, but Eddie is not in the rankings. He hasn't been doing a lot of singles wrestling. He has been focused on this teaming with Moxley. So what you're probably going to have is if they went down the route of, okay, it's going to be Eddie, the issue I also have with that is that Eddie has just recently, not long ago, lost a title shot against Moxley. And he has, I don't think he is ready to have another one because if he loses again, he suddenly becomes that person. And this is what happened with Samoa Joe, and it's also happened with Bray Wyatt. He can talk the talk, but he can't back it up when it matters. And that I don't want to happen to Eddie because I love Eddie's character. I love his promos, but him becoming a guy who can't back up what he says, can't back up the words, no matter what he says, is something that I don't want to see happen to him. So we've just obviously had Brian Cage defeat Hangman Page, so we're not gonna get Hangman Page versus Eddie versus Kenny at Double or Nothing. You could probably look at maybe doing Page, but the next highest ranked person now is Orange Cassidy. So at this point in time, the only real people that Kenny's feuding with is Mox and Eddie, and both those matches I don't particularly want to see at Double or Nothing, especially when Double or Nothing really has to be a very good pay-per-view, because the Revolution obviously had a lot of controversy towards the end of it. I think, and there was a few weak matches, so they really have to push something out. And I don't think Eddie versus Kenny is going to be the match to do that. Promo wise, great, yeah. Eddie will sell a ticket, because that man opens his mouth, and he will sell ice to Eskimos, no issues at all. Yeah. But in the ring, a lot of people have made this comment that in the ring, he's not near the level of Kenny at all, and that's everyone knows that. So there's my first issue. My second issue is obviously Young Bucks. Who are they facing at Double or Nothing? They are the AEW World Championships. Now, we have got this tournament for some reason next week. Now, the issue I have with this is that SCU came down and did a promo after the tag match. Great promo. I really liked it. Only for that promo to basically mean nothing, because instead of them saying, they came down and said, yep, cool, we're coming after you. We want to rid yous and get rid of yous. Cool. Now you got to fight in a 4-way tournament in order to get the win. Now, they made a very big point of, if we lose, we are going to retire. Now, that they have specified that doesn't mean, that means that if they lose in a one-on-one match, they'll retire. However, the story with the promos and that is that I have it all but pretty much 100% that they're going to win. I'd be surprised if they don't. And then they're going to face the Young Bucks, and they should. They are the number one contenders. They have won 11 straight. They should be fighting. But this entire tournament next week is not – there's no point in it. So when they fight them, are they going to fight them at Double or Nothing? Is that what they're doing? Or are they going to beat them, have them separate beforehand, and then fight someone else? Like, for me, it's just they are the champions, but they're all wrapped up in this feud. They're all wrapped up in this whole thing where I don't think that they're doing what they need to be doing sometimes to promote the build to Double or Nothing, which, we have got 4 episodes left, like I said. They do need to do something serious to build a match for Kenny that is worthy. SCU versus Young Bucks at Double or Nothing, sure. I'm not really thrilled, but it will be a good match. But the outcome, pretty much, I don't see SCU getting the tag titles off of Young Bucks. So yeah, that's my little rant. Yeah, look, I'm enjoying what they're doing. I find it funny, but also I think it's just taking a little bit away from the build that could be to when you're especially 4 weeks out of your major pay-per-view. And pay-per-views are meant to be these big, massive things, especially because they've only got 4 of them. They really need to make sure that they are, smashing them out of the park, especially when the TV product is so good. So yeah, look, I hope that they can do something, but at this moment, I've got no interest in what they're sort of building towards, because I think that it would be damaging to a lot of the characters here.
Oh, he's a heel with a point.
Yeah.
You do actually make a good point, I think. Sergi, what he said makes a lot of sense to me. I think you and I are looking at it from the perspective of this character. These characters of the Elite, they are phenomenal characters, and I have so much fun watching them. However, it takes 2 to tango, right? You need to have a challenger at some point. So Anthony bringing up that point, I think it's a fair one.
Well, I think that that who the challenger would be has been up in the air all along, and that this week made that even more so, because a lot of people said, they're going to find a way to duck Hangman Adam Page. He's going to end up out of that running for some reason because we think they're going to delay that and push that story back further. But it was always possible that they might say, no, we're doing that story now until this week.
I'm actually
Right?
I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because that was exactly where I was going to go next. Brian Cage just massacring Hangman Page in the opener of this show.
And there are just so many possibilities. I think that getting your mind set on one of them and saying, oh, I don't think that they're going a good direction because I don't think this should happen. It's like, well, that might not happen. At this point, I think that that the contendership for the world title, for the men's singles world title, is so up in the air that it's okay to just say it's exciting that this is up in the air and we don't know where it's going to go, and trust, because we can give AEW a certain amount of trust that they're going to stick the landing. And I'm just sort of like, God, are they going to go with Orange Cassidy? Are they going to go with Christian? It could be literally, any babyface with a decent winning record could end up being the guy at Double or Nothing.
Yeah, that's true. I've seen ideas brought up that Christian is kind of involved in this story with Team Taz, and so he already beat Will Hobbs, so he's going to go beat Ricky Starks, and then he'll eventually beat Brian Cage, and Christian Cage will be the number one contender, and it'll be Christian versus Omega at Double or Nothing. I'd be fine with that. I think Christian has shown that he's still got it, and he's shown that he's still got it against Kazarian, who is a tremendous wrestler, but also is, I don't want to say over the hill, but he's past his prime in terms of his athletic ability. And Will Hobbs, who is basically the opposite, he's entering his prime, but he's inexperienced. We know that Kenny Omega, if your cap is a 5-star match, he'll get a 6-star match out of you. And Christian Cage, I mean, he has fought really good matches in his 2 that he's fought so far. This particular match with Brian Cage versus Hangman, I loved this. I thought it was great. I've been pretty open about the fact that the Hangman character, it doesn't always connect with me, especially not recently, ever since he started this whole kind of, I don't have any friends and I just drink a lot kind of character. It hasn't always connected with me. I know that's I'm in the minority. But from my personal opinion, that's where I stand. But man, Brian Cage just looked like a monster in this match. I mean, he looked like, this is the kind of thing where I would say, Anthony brought up this problem, because anyone who faces the Bucks or Kenny at Double or Nothing, you would say, how the hell are they going to win the title, right? I mean, Kenny he's at the forefront of one of the biggest changes in wrestling that we've seen in the last 20 years with the whole Forbidden Door situation, and the Young Bucks, who's going to beat them, right? I mean, they just turned heel, so who's going to beat them? Well, Brian Cage looking like this, you put him in the ring against Kenny Omega, and just by pure appearances, by physical appearances, you would say, yeah, Cage could win this match. I don't care how the booking looks. Look at the size of this man, and look what he can do. I mean, he just, like, Hangman Page weighs what, like 240 pounds, 250 pounds? Brian Cage just drill claws him like he's nothing. I mean, like, it looked like Brian Cage drill clawing like some 150-pound jobber or something. Like, this guy is a terrifying animal of a man. And so you put him in against Kenny Omega, I would believe in a second that Brian Cage would beat Kenny Omega for the title. So I really like the decision here to have Cage go over, have him become, for now, the number one contender. So I don't know how you guys feel. I guess we'll start with Sergi just real quick. How you felt about this? It worked for me. Did it work for you?
Oh, well, Cage versus Page was the match that I previewed in Styles Makes Fights. And I was, as often happens, very, very wrong about where I thought things were going with this. And it was very revealing as to why I was. I would not find Cage very convincing in a match against Omega, because against Omega he would not be able to have the advantages he had against Page, which was a a starting in the middle, which is what he needed. The thing about Cage, and the reason that I did not find him convincing as being able to beat Adam, is that he is much more effective in a short match than in a long one. He has tons and tons of strength, but does he have the conditioning to go 20 minutes? Taz, in his commentary in the match on Dark this week, said that he had seen a hole in Adam Page's game and had found a way for Cage to win against Page, and that was partly true, but you know, the old projection. What he had seen was the hole in Cage's game and how to prop up that, which is if we get Page as if it was the middle of the match for him instead of the end or the beginning, at the beginning, then Brian Cage can start from the middle of the match, basically. He was able to get his match in without having to survive as long as he would have had to if Page hadn't been beaten down to begin with.
Wow, you make a great point. I didn't even consider that, but you are absolutely right. And it worked in this case because Hangman is babyface. So he gets the sympathy by the heels getting the heat and Brian Cage powerbombing him on the stage. So, yeah, you're basically starting in the middle. That same thing wouldn't work against Kenny because he's not the babyface. You would not.
Well, and also he has the super elite around him.
That's true. So you wouldn't even be able to do it. But if you could, if it was a situation where for some reason Kenny and Cage were left together, even if Cage was able to do that, it wouldn't be effective just from a storytelling perspective because Kenny's the heel. So you have the de facto babyface in that match getting the advantage on the heel, getting the heat on the heel. It wouldn't work. So, no, you actually make a great point. You make a great point. I now don't know if I would like to see that match.
Well, you know, it's one of those things. I definitely think I would enjoy Omega versus Cage, but I definitely would see Omega wearing him down and taking him into the deep water, and that being where it would go.
Yeah. It feels, though, that would be more of like a TV match. It kind of feels like. The story of can the guy hang, that's more of a TV storyline to me than a pay-per-view storyline.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Well, here's a storyline that I obviously really love. We'll go through the rest of it. There were so many matches on this card, and we still haven't even talked about the Blood and Guts, which is coming up next week. We will get there. We will get to Blood and Guts, but I just want to cover a few things that stood out about the remaining matches. Obviously, for any of you who have been listening to the podcast for any amount of time, I'm going to start with the Factory and my boy Anthony Ogogo. You guys don't have to stick with this. This is just something I want to point out. This particular match, the Factory taking on the Nightmare Family. I thought this was great. This was an AEW babyface heel match where what AEW likes to do that I'm noticing is when they have babyfaces that they want to protect or that they want to get over, what they'll do is they'll have the heels get the heat like normal, like we would see, but then the comeback for the babyfaces takes a long time. So in our statistics, the babyfaces end up with even, or in this case, they ended up with actually more than half of the match offense. The Nightmare Family had 52% of the match offense because they wanted to get Big Shotty over. And to me, it worked. I was watching this and saying, man, this guy's good. Like, this guy's really got something. The fact that the commentators are putting him over, he's the prized possession of the Nightmare Family, which is funny because that's kind of the argument that QT's making about the three guys he's got, that he's saying these are the prized, prospects that we had in the Factory. So I thought that little bit of storytelling was great. I thought Big Shotty really stood out in this match. I thought he was awesome. Nick Camarado is just a powerhouse. We know that. They are massively putting over Anthony Ogogo's punch. He punched Lee Johnson, rolled him back in the ring, and it took like a minute and a half for QT to cover him, and then he still won without doing anything. I think it was QT, or it might have been Solo, one of those guys. it took like a minute and a half to cover him, and he still won. And then Billy Gunn had like the mummy tape around his stomach from when Ogogo punched him last week, and then he hit him again. Like, oh man, that was great. As someone who's a huge fan of Ogogo, I absolutely love to see that. They're putting that punch over like it's the most dangerous move since like the Immortal leg drop or something. Like, the One Winged Angel is like the only finisher right now that I could think is more protected than that, in terms of like the commentators actively point out no one's kicking out of this, at least in AEW. So I really love that as an Ogogo fan. And then the angle with Cody I thought was great. Babyface returns, Babyface gets the heat, Cody gets to pose on the bus, and I thought it was really good. I'm really excited to see every potential matchup that happens here. And especially because we still have yet to see Ogogo in a real singles match. We saw him going against a jobber, took like a minute, and he looked great, and then he punched him out of existence. So we have yet to see him against someone who is really going to put up a fight and really push him. So I'm excited to see that. And Camarado we haven't seen in a singles match on Dynamite since, I believe, his match against Moxley. So those are two guys that I'm really, really excited to see going forward. The other match that I want to talk about is Orange Cassidy versus Penta. I thought that match was really good as well. So I will turn it over to you guys. We'll start with Anthony. If you have any thoughts that I didn't cover about the Nightmare Family versus Factory match, and if you want to move on, talk about Cassidy versus Penta.
I actually don't have anything to say about Cassidy and Penta. It was a good match. I'm waiting for the blowout between the trio fight of Death Triangle versus Best Friends, so that's where that's going, obviously. In terms of the factory that, now we've obviously, me and you have had some discussions about this before.
I don't want it to make it seem like I'm forcing all the conversation around this group I have this irrational love of.
Oh, you definitely do have an irrational love, but that's
I know.
okay.
I don't want to force the conversation around that.
No, absolutely not. I was actually going to bring this up anyway, so it's all fine.
Okay.
Okay. So next week we have got QT versus Cody. Mm-hmm. Who's winning? Who do you think should win?
Who do I think should win?
Yeah, who do you think should win? Versus QT versus Cody. Who do you think should win that match next week?
In my biased opinion, what I would do is have Cody dominate, and then referee distraction, a go-go punch, and then have QT win. If you really want to, if you want to put over a go-go big, that's how you do it. Cody Rhodes is like one of the most protected wrestlers in the company. Yeah.
So I think that would be really good, but I think this real story here is and that could be used, but the real story I think that they're putting over is not QT versus Cody. It is a Go-Go versus Cody. That's where I think the end game here is, and that Cody
you're speaking my language here.
I think Cody would take the L for a Go-Go to get him over. Now, I think that we're going to get Nick versus Dustin in some sort of a crazy match, which will be great because Dustin is amazing, and I can't wait to see him work with Nick Colorado. Mm-hmm. So that's all good. But for this week's episode, the match was really fine. That go home angle was a bit silly when they got up on the bus. Like there's no reason why QT had to climb up on the bus. I was all fine with everything until they got up there. And then Aubrey, also one single referee. Aubrey is also climbing up. What are you doing, guys? What are you doing? Like, yeah, it's all great from character, but it makes no sense. And I don't like it when wrestling doesn't make sense. So
that's fair. For me, I think it was solely to get the pose of Cody flexing on top of the bus. That's the only reason they did that.
Yeah, I'm sure that's why they did it. But yeah, for me, it made no sense. So yeah, look, next week I actually think that Cody might beat QT, and then there might be an after match sort of beatdown from a Go-Go to Cody if it doesn't happen your way. But yeah, it is interesting to see what they're doing. But I think that the main story here isn't what we all thought, which was, okay, this is QT's story. This is a Go-Go story.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I think again, if the point here is to put a Go-Go over Cody, sign me up for that. every day of the week and twice on Sunday. I absolutely love that. Camarado versus Dustin, great. I would love to see that. One thing I would also like to see, I want to see more with Lee Johnson. I mean, he really impressed me in this match. I don't know, Craig over on our write-up on ProWrestlingMusings.com, he came away talking about Camarado, and obviously Camarado looked great, but I don't know if I'm in the minority by thinking that Lee Johnson was the one who really shined in this match, but I thought he did. I thought he was great. I would love to see him go over Solo. It seems like Solo is kind of the grunt of this group, so QT is the mob boss, Ogogo's the enforcer, Camarado is the scary one, and then Solo's kind of like the grunt almost. So I'd love to see...
The pin eater.
Say again?
The pin eater.
The pin eater, yeah, exactly. Which you can't
have
do.
One.
You can't do too many times, right? A guy can't eat the pin every single time, otherwise it just becomes, obvious and boring. But in the case of putting over Lee Johnson, I'd love to see him go over Solo. And so you would end up with 3 new stars. You would get, Johnson, Solo's obviously not like Dustin or Cody, but in terms of if you're going to put a feud on TV and Lee Johnson goes over, then you have Johnson coming off a feud, and then obviously in our scenario, you've got Camarado and Ogogo both beating, 2 mega stars in AEW. I'm all for that. I think everyone knows my particular feelings about the Factory and Ogogo. So, Sergi, I'll turn it over to you. If you want to talk about Orange Cassidy and Penta, since you have written about Penta before in your Styles Make Fights series, or if you just want to join Anthony and I and just talk about the Factory, I'm not going to stop you.
Well, I certainly agree with you all that Lee Johnson and Nick Camarado and Anthony Ogogo are the faces that they're intending to put the shine on with this whole storyline. They'll find different ways to do that and different ways to break them off and give them opportunities to shine in different combinations. I'm sure it will be great. Regarding Cassidy and Penta, I thought that was a fascinating match in all kinds of ways. For one, as far as ratings go, between that the end of that match and the beginning of the Pinnacle Pinnacle and Inner Circle segment is the peak of the ratings for the night. It definitely says that Orange Cassidy arguably is the draw here, or possibly Penta to some extent, a little bit of both. It was a pretty big matchup. Orange Cassidy and Penta are both guys that have a big fan base, and that have a lot of a very distinct character that they've done a very good job of putting over, and that a character that works into everything they do in every match, and they played off of each other using that in a way that I thought was really, really well done, as far as just playing off of each other's taunts and each other's mannerisms, and incorporating their characters a lot into everything they were doing in the ring. And 22 taunts over the course of the match. Craig makes a point of that. Yes. The other interesting thing about the match is that it is a very, in a way, a classic underdog match, or in the sense of fighting from underneath match. But there was never really a comeback. It was a desperate hanging on kind of a match, kind of along the lines of what we saw with Jungle Boy and Darby Allin last week. Orange was sort of desperately holding on and managed to catch Penta in a moment of distraction, managed to get him at just the right moment, and was never on top, even with a brief comeback, if you look at the flow of offense. Also similar to what we saw with Christian and Will Hobbs a week or two ago. It was just a case of the babyface holding on by the skin of their teeth and finding a way to win at the very end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this match really works with someone like Penta because he is so believable when it comes to getting the heat like this. I mean, I did not appreciate how balanced Penta is as a wrestler. And when it comes to your series, it's all about the styles of wrestlers. Penta is someone who, obviously, when you see his look and you see his mannerisms, you think, okay, he's a luchador, and he has the athleticism of a luchador. But when you actually look at his style as a fighter, it's actually a lot more nuanced than that. And he showed it in this one. I mean, he had that spot where he caught Orange Cassidy on a dive with the military press, just caught him out of midair. And you're like, okay, so this guy, like, he's got the athleticism, but he's also strong, right? He can do all, and his leg kicks, right? He's a great striker because he keeps, I mean, we've seen it with his strike downs in this match and the number of strikes that he threw. He's a great striker. And again, when you look at the styles, there is nothing that Penta is not at least decent at, and many things that he excels at. And that's something that until he's gotten this singles run, or at least me, I haven't really appreciated how balanced he is as a wrestler.
Yeah, he's absolutely a someone who came up with luchadors, so he has that aerial game just to keep up with his peers, but that's never really been his focus. More of a brawler with great submission wrestling skills as well.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his brother is probably the best high flyer in the business right now, so it's such a good juxtaposition to have Penta getting more into that variance of styles, just to see him contrast with how great Rey Fenix is. Hopefully we'll see Phoenix back pretty soon.
Absolutely. I would say that a contrast is a big part of why he doesn't focus on the aerial game as much. It's like, that's my brother's got that. I can do that just to, when we need to coordinate and both be doing it or something. But when given a choice, I'm going to focus more on strikes, and I'm going to focus on holds and breaking somebody's arm.
Right. I think this is something that AEW does. I wouldn't be surprised if we see this, where AEW loves to remind you that wrestlers have different aspects to their game. We just were talking about it in the Darby Allin match, where Darby's fought multiple extremely different styles of matches over the last month. I wouldn't be surprised if Penta at some point got a match where he started doing a bunch of high-flying stuff. Like, he starts showing, oh yeah, this guy's a world-class luchador, as well as being all of these other things that he's also great at. That's something that AEW loves to do, because AEW loves to remind you that they have so many tremendous in-ring workers. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see that, in which case that would be excellent, because Penta's good at everything. So you'll get no complaints from me if we get that.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I really don't know if it's a matter of AEW, anyone in management, or Tony Khan specifically asking that of wrestlers, or if it's more simply giving them the freedom to do it. It's just like, I'm giving you guys the freedom to do what you choose to, and what they choose to do with that freedom is that they want to show different aspects of their game in different matchups. And I think that's a big part of, like Anthony was saying, that he saw Darby Allin probably trying to control the offense more and working less of his from underneath style, because he's being worn down and he feels he needs to control. And that's a story that they may do. But another aspect that I think needs to be kept in mind is that he's always sometimes controlled a match. It really depends on who he's matched up with, and that it's not just a matter of it changing over time, but also it being a part of who you're working with. Like you were saying, it was a surprise to you that he was going after the hand and the arm in his work, instead of going after the legs on a bigger guy, knocking down the tree. And it's like, he was working towards weakening Ten's finisher. What's that hold? The full Nelson.
Full Nelson.
The full Nelson is Ten's finisher. If you've watched a little bit of Dark, you've seen Ten put guys out with that. And Allin obviously had done his homework and was trying to prevent. There's lots of his offense that worked with his hands, such as his throws and stuff, but especially trying to keep his finisher from being as strong as it normally would have been, and which at the end allowed him to escape from that finisher.
Yeah. You're absolutely right about that. And I think just a quick aside to talk about more generally, because you bring up the question of, is this a call from management or is this the opposite, not a call from management and them just saying, you know what, do you, and the wrestlers feel like, okay, I want to have this kind of match. I want to show this. I will say that I think there's a third option here. I wouldn't consider Kenny Omega to be management because he's obviously active every week, but we know how involved he is when it comes to the booking aspect and when it comes to working with the wrestlers. And something that we all know, if you've been following Kenny Omega, is how much detail he puts into all of the stories that he tells in all of his matches and how much he thinks about these things. And I would not be surprised at all if Kenny Omega was the one who was, kind of talking to all these wrestlers and saying, I think you should do this, or, I think you should try this style, because Kenny thinks these things through so well. And I think that's a big reason why we can use these stats on ProWrestlingMusings.com to talk so in depth about the stories and matches that we're seeing, because there is so much thought put in. We talk about it every week, but I think it's such an important point that AEW, whether it's the wrestlers, whether it's the management, whether it's like Kenny and Cody, whoever it is, just puts so much thought into how they're going to do these matches and what would make sense for their characters. And it leads us to this exact situation where what we see on paper makes sense. And we're seeing it, play out in real time. Speaking of a story that makes sense, is obviously Blood and Guts coming up next week. I don't even know how to.
Nice segue.
Thank you. I don't even know how to really talk about this, because it's the build. It's just been an absolute car crash of a build, but in the best possible way. I think the build's been so effective, but it's taken place over such a short time. They have to do it so quickly. This parlay on this Dynamite, I thought, was absolutely excellent. I thought it was tremendous. I thought it was a great job from AEW to resist the urge to have a brawl. Everyone knows AEW loves them some brawls. They do it all the time. This particular time, they did not. They resisted the urge to do it. It was so much more effective for it, I think, because these guys are such phenomenal promos that they can sell tickets. They can get people to tune in next week without ever having to touch each other. And I think it was evidenced. I thought Sean Spears cut the worst promo of the entire parlay, and his promo was one of the best that I've seen in the last 4 weeks. That's how good this thing was. Every other promo, whether it was Dax saying, I've made peace with I might die in this match, so I want you to give your kids a message from Uncle Dax that you might die in this match. Whether it was Santana saying, you've never been locked up, we'll let our hands do the talking. MJF saying, I'm going to take your spot to Chris Jericho, and then Chris Jericho, another immortal promo from him talking about, you earn your spot. We're gonna wipe the floor with you. We're gonna, that's the only spot you deserve. And then his closing line, saying that 69 was the summer of love, 2021 is gonna be the summer of pain, and summer starts early for you. I absolutely loved everything about this. It has made me so excited for Blood and Guts. I can't wait to see what's going to happen here, and I really don't know what's going to happen here. I think it's completely unpredictable. So I'll turn it over to you guys. Anthony first. This build has been short, but in my opinion, it's been tight, and it has made me so excited for Blood and Guts. It's hit a fever pitch at the exact right time. But I do think there is a legitimate criticism to say a match this big should have more build. Where do you come down on this?
I'm going to definitely disagree. I don't think the build has been very good at all. Until this week.
Full heel on us. On this.
I am. No, look, for me, I was speaking to a few other people on Twitter about this, but a few people have felt that this build has been hurt by the speed. I understand that obviously they wanted to do this. They wanted to get this done. The story's kind of there. But when you really look at it closely, the first thing was obviously we had the Pinnacle arrive and destroy the Inner Circle. That was great. I love that. Then you had the Pinnacle the Inner Circle come back and destroy the Pinnacle. Great, that was fantastic. Then we got Tyson involved, and for me, that put a real big damper on this because he was involved for 2 weeks. So there was him coming out, and then there was him as the special guest, which for me put a real downer on this build. Then there was obviously the sit down interview with the Pinnacle, but when you really look at it, I don't think that they've done enough to really warrant why they need this blood and guts match, and that's something that I feel that when you look at the NXT, they do the War Games match when things are so out of control that there's literally no other way to get things sorted than by locking these guys up because there's just warfare all over the place. And I don't feel that with this. I don't feel that there is a need for a blood and guts match for them. Now, this promo was great. I really enjoyed the promo. It did sell me on it, and it did make me want to actually watch this. But until this week, I wasn't too keen. Now, I have some worries about this match. First of all, I don't think the Pinnacle's going to win, and they need to win. But the issue with that is that they've decided that the rules are you have to submit or surrender. Now, we've got two different things here. We've got a brand new faction, which is the Pinnacle, who are trying to be the top heels. But they can't be the top heels because that's the Elite. The Elite are the top heels. So where does that now leave the Pinnacle? Are they the top mid-card heels? Then you've got the Inner Circle, who are trying to become babyface. So you've got a newly turned babyface team versus a team that's just really formed and trying to find its identity. Uh-huh. These sorts of matches are built for babyfaces to kind of win. Now they gave the advantage to the to the Pinnacle with it just by doing it, which I didn't really like. You know, they could have done a coin toss or anything. I didn't particularly like them just saying, "Oh yeah, you have the advantage." Like, you know, the advantage is something that you want to have because you're going into this sort of a match. I understand why they did it, but you know, it also bothered me a little bit. But when you're looking at the outcome, okay, you can only win by submit or surrender. Mm-hmm. Baby faces are not really known for submitting or surrendering. That is more of a heel thing. And Shawn Spears is the only logical person to eat that loss. And that could lead to him getting kicked out of the group later on down the track. But out of all the guys in this match, Shawn Spears is the only one who makes sense. The only other way that I can think of them doing it is that maybe they hold one of the Inner Circle hostage, maybe Sammy, they hold him hostage and force Chris Jericho to do it. That I wouldn't be too bad on, but I think that everything's saying that the Inner Circle are going to win this. That's what if I was a betting person, I'd be putting on. But yeah, for me, until this week, it really didn't sell me with the build. I think it was too quick. I don't think that it warrants this sort of a match. I'm keen for the match. I'm keen to see it. But until this week, I wasn't really sold on it.
So I would counter with this. You make fantastic points, and I'm not going to say you're wrong about anything because you're certainly not, and that's a legitimate opinion that I know a lot of people have. I'm
definitely probably wrong. I'm probably definitely wrong on a lot of things.
Well, no. I mean, we don't know. Here's what I would counter with, because everything you said makes sense about the way that we would see this match traditionally get booked. However, I think what we've seen AEW be very, very open to is unconventional decisions. And sometimes they don't work, but a lot of times they do. And we just saw one on this episode of Dynamite in the opener when Brian Cage just comes out and massacres Hangman, and everyone's like, well, I mean, how, like, everyone's theorizing about how do you do this? Hangman can't lose, but you don't want Brian Cage to lose. He's your monster, so what do you do? And they just said, nah, Brian Cage is going to win. That's just how we're going to do it. So I think it's very possible that AEW just says the Pinnacle is going to be our next group. So we're going to have MJF submit Chris Jericho right there. And that's just how it's going to be, because MJF has the Salt of the Earth finisher. So it's already built for him. It's right there. So I could definitely see AEW just doing that and saying, you know what, the Inner Circle, they're better off separate. You know, Chris Jericho is getting towards the end of his in-ring career. You know, we want him to transition to commentary, or he wants to go be with his band, or whatever, you know, whatever the case may be. Santana and Ortiz are better alone as a team. Sammy Guevara, we want to push him as a singles guy. Jake Hager still fighting MMA. So they may just say, you know what, it's time for the Inner Circle. And, you know, the Pinnacle is the next big thing. I would say, when it comes to talking about, you know, the top heel group, I think there is room for the Pinnacle and the Elite to be top heel groups together simultaneously, because they're so different in terms of their character. What we've seen from the Pinnacle, MJF is also an old school heel, right? I think the term is showing face, right? It was generally used to talk about, like, Ric Flair. He would go up to the top and, like, the babyface would pull him down. He'd pull his trunks down, so you just see Flair's bare ass, and that, you know, they call it showing face. The idea is you want the heel to show humility, and that's, you know, that'll really get a pop for the babyface. MJF is so good at that, but he's deviously smart. He outsmarted the entirety of the Inner Circle to form the Pinnacle, right? I mean, only Sammy Guevara had any idea what he was trying to do, and even Sammy was wrong. And he outsmarted Chris Jericho, one of the veterans of this business. He is like a deplorable person, and he's slimy, and it's in such stark contrast to what we talked about from the Elite, because the Elite are morons. They're idiots. The only thing that they do is they have the advantage in numbers. Doc Gallows is this giant that no one can overcome. And talent, yeah, exactly. And Kenny Omega is one of the greatest wrestlers that ever lived. The Young Bucks are one of the best tag teams in history. But they're morons. They don't do anything right. They just are good at wrestling. The Pinnacle is like the opposite, because, I mean, other than FTR is one of the best tag teams in the world, but, like, Shawn Spears didn't really get any plaudits for his wrestling. MJF wrestling, the in-ring work is the weakest part of his game because it's such a great promo. And Wardlow, we've barely seen him wrestle. We kind of don't even know what he can do. So they're almost opposite groups in terms of how they're booked, what they excel at, and what their characters are. So I'd be okay with the Pinnacle and the Elite both occupying, the top heel group spot. Not everyone needs to have a title in order to be really effective. You know, there's tons of people throughout history that were super over without ever having that title, face and heel. You know, you have Jake Roberts, you got Roddy Piper, you got Ted DiBiase. It's possible to be super over and very successful without having a title. And I think both of these groups can pull that off and make it work. So that's the only point I would push back on you for that. But so that leaves us with Anthony being underwhelmed by this build. I am in love with this build. So, Sergi, you got to be the tiebreaker here, my friend. Blood and Guts is next week. What do you think about this build? Are you excited for the Blood and Guts match coming up on May 5th?
Oh, I'm very much looking forward to the match, of course. And I definitely have a different perspective on the build and how it hit with me. I think that I didn't need a lot of convincing. To me, as soon as the Pinnacle was formed, like, they need to destroy the Inner Circle in order to achieve any of their other goals. So that's going to be their first goal, just right out of the gate. So that already makes it war. It's not a matter of why is it war. It's like it was war from the start. That they can't coexist. Just by their nature, they can't coexist. So the Pinnacle and the Inner Circle headed towards this confrontation that may be existential for one or both of them.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing that I said about this, and you mentioned that how we were surprised that it didn't break down. We were surprised that the promo, that the parlay did not lead to violence. And I was expecting MJF to have a trap for Jericho. And I thought that it would be a violent trap in the sense of that there would be something that would give him an advantage by physicality. But I wasn't really sure what the trap was going to be, and would Jericho be ready for it, and would there be? And then I realized it wasn't anything like that. It was completely mental.
Mm-hmm.
The trap was goading Sammy into giving up the man advantage, just by pride, saying we have the right to this, blah blah blah, and knowing what a hothead Sammy is, that he would go in there and say, you can have it, fine, we don't care, we don't need it. So that's a big part of it. I think that that everything with the Pinnacle has to be looked at from the point of view of Tully and MJF are being presented as incredibly strategic minds, as people who have a plan, and that plan definitely involves gold, but they do not want to. They would rather have somebody else finish off the Elite and then come in. But I would assume. But at some point, they are going to want that gold. And however that turns out. I think that the big thing is, first off, I would say that I halfway agree with Anthony that, I see if the Inner Circle, or excuse me, if the Pinnacle win, it's going to be because they did the classic way of getting a babyface to submit, which is threatening someone they care about. If they do a threat to do something that would really seriously injure Sammy Guevara, and convincing Jericho to quit based on that, that would be the most obvious way to get to an ending with the submit or surrender rules. So the only real question is, the Pinnacle needs to win this feud in the end. And the real question is Blood and Guts really the end? Of course, traditionally, this type of match is a climactic match. It would be weird for it not to be the end. And presuming that it is, then yeah, it has to be the Pinnacle, because the Pinnacle must win this feud. Of course, it's possible that they may choose to say, we're going to give the Inner Circle this one, and there's going to be some other match that will end up being literally a loser must disband match at Double or Nothing of some kind. But I guess it remains to be seen.
It would kind of fit with the name if you put that match at Double or Nothing.
Exactly.
I was about to agree with you there, Sergi. I think that the outcome is that Inner Circle will win, and then they'll have MJF versus Jericho at Double or Nothing, and maybe put on that loser must disband thing. But I think that the ending of this is Jericho versus MJF, not the Inner Circle versus this. And I think whoever wins this match, the Blood and Guts match, won't be winning that match. So that's why I think that the Inner Circle will win this one, and then MJF will win and force them to disband, maybe.
I can see that. That's definitely a possibility.
I wonder if we won't get maybe like a series of matches, and then whoever loses the series, they have to disband, because
like based on points.
Well, so sort of like this. So you would have there's many feuds breaking out that are very clear. So you have Wardlow versus Jake Hager. You have FTR versus Santana and Ortiz. You have Shawn Spears versus Sammy Guevara, and you have MJF versus Chris Jericho. So I could foresee a situation, because if you break it down like that, you want FTR to go over Santana and Ortiz, because I think the plan ultimately is for FTR to be champions again, I would assume. You want Sammy Guevara to go over Shawn Spears, because Sammy is going to be a star going forward. That seems to be AEW's plan. You want MJF to go over Chris Jericho, because MJF is going to be one of the biggest acts in wrestling for the next 10 to 15 years at least. And Wardlow and Hager, that could go either way. It's whatever they really want. So in that sense, I think you could have a situation where you say, okay, we're gonna have this series of matches. You'd have to find probably a fifth one, or just drop Wardlow and Hager and just have three, and then say whoever wins best out of 5 or best out of 3, other group has to disband, and it comes down to MJF versus Jericho because you have FTR beating Santana and Ortiz, 1 point for Pinnacle. You have Sammy beating Shawn Spears, 1 point for Inner Circle. Comes down to MJF versus Jericho. MJF wins, and Inner Circle disband. I could potentially see that, just because the feuds break out that way.
That would make sense with the timing to Double or Nothing. Like I said, we got about 4 episodes. So next week is Blood and Guts. Then you've got 3 episodes. So you could have 1 episode of build. Then you've got the 2 matches, one on the 19th, one on the 26th, and then the final match at Double or Nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could do that. I mean, you could. It would be a little risky to do it this way, but you could have all 3 matches at Double or Nothing. I mean, it's possible. You'd risk the show going long is the problem, but
yeah, I wouldn't do it all at Double or Nothing, but that's just my opinion. I don't think all of them need to be. You need to have a mix-up of different feuds and different matches, and I don't think putting a single feud on a pay-per-view and making it longer than it needs to be is really the answer. Especially when you got TV there for a reason. So
yeah. I'm just throwing that idea out there. I mean, in reality, this is, I think, another example of AEW appearing to book themselves into a corner, but they've done this before. This is not the first time where we've said, what the hell is AEW going to do? Because there's multiple obvious outcomes, right? The Pinnacle can't lose. They're a new group, and they're built to be stars, so they can't lose. But to Anthony's point, babyfaces don't usually submit or surrender. And Shawn Spears is the only guy in this match that doesn't appear to have plans going forward, like big plans for him going forward. So it seems like there's multiple outcomes here that need to happen when, of course, in reality, only one can happen. Well, again, I would go back to what we just saw with Brian Cage and Hangman Page, where, again, there were multiple outcomes that needed to happen. And what AEW did was just pick one, and they said, this is what we're going to go with. And for me, it worked really well. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see AEW doing the same thing here, where they just pick an outcome to go with, and they just roll with it. And whether it's Inner Circle or Pinnacle, I don't know. I think either one could work, but that's kind of why I'm so excited about this, because you have such an insane match, and it's a match that I have no idea who is going to win. I really don't. Like, there's no element of predictability in this match to me, and when you have a match like this where you've been building for a month, it's this insane match that we've never seen on AEW before. You need to have that level of unpredictability, and to me, AEW's done that exactly, and it's pretty hard to come by in wrestling these days, so I commend them for doing that.
Yeah, they're really unpredictable sometimes. I really, but not that often. Every once in a while, it's just like, I have no idea who's going to win. A lot of times you do know who's going to win, and that's okay, because there should be tiers. You should know who's most likely going to win between a lot of different pairings. But Brian Cage, that really took me by surprise, and it really shook up all of the possibilities for the world title division. The men's singles division.
I agree. Anthony, did you have one final thought on this?
Yeah, one final thought. I know I've been overly critical, but
no, it's a good contrast to me.
For me, I just want to remind I really love AEW. I love what they're doing. I love everything that they do. It's just sometimes it's just. You see certain things happening certain ways, and you're like, okay, cool. I don't particularly like this certain thing, and then you get so caught up in it. But overall, I like the fact that they do have options there. It's just sometimes we got to see what the outcome is. So all of this is just, us thinking, okay, cool, us fantasy booking a little bit what we think is going to happen or what we want to see happen. So it'll be interesting to see what actually happens. And when I come back in 2 weeks' time, it'll be interesting to go and say, hey, I was completely wrong about that, or haha, I was completely right. Told you so.
Yeah, You brought up something that I think is really important that gets lost very often in the discourse that we see on social media, Twitter in particular, where, yes, it is very possible to love a product and be able to criticize it and point out, things that you would like to see done better or whatever the case may be. The reality is you watch Dynamite every week, and more than that, we're actually about to get to more stuff that you watch every week about AEW, so it's obvious that you like the product, and clearly Sergi and I both like the product, so that's not the issue here. It's all about talking about these potential outcomes and these things that might happen, things that we agree with or disagree with. The reality is AEW has earned our trust, so even if we don't like the build to Blood and Guts, or if we don't like what's going on with the Elite or whatever the case may be, the reality is AEW's done a good enough job that whatever it might be, there is still the reality that it's probably going to be good because we keep watching the product and we don't watch bad wrestling, at least not intentionally. So and that's something that I think needs to be pointed out, because again, it's something that does get lost. So speaking of other things about AEW that you watch, Anthony, you have a piece just in the last week, a couple days ago, talking about AEW's YouTube numbers, specifically with Dark and Elevation. I thought this was really interesting because this is the one part of AEW that I am not a huge fan of. I love the concept of getting more people to watch the product, and YouTube obviously is a place where a lot of growth can happen. However, I feel like they're going about it the wrong way, and it seems to me that the numbers may play that out a little bit. So, Anthony, you tracked the last month of episodes of Dark and Elevation. So, tell us what you found about this and any observations that you've made as someone who watches those programs fairly consistently.
Yeah, look, I think most of my pieces now are involving social media on some aspect because I find it very fascinating about views and trends and everything like that. It's fascinating for me. So most of my pieces are on YouTube ratings and that sort of stuff. I've yet to do Twitter ratings because it's very hard to quantify that into something. But when we look at it really, and this is, I guess, it's very worrying for me, potentially. So we look at Elevation. So I tracked Elevation through its entire history. So from episode 1 up until episode 5, which was the most recent episode before this week's episode. And it's all over the place. So you started with 1.165 million. Then you went down to under 500,000. Then you went to over 1 million. Then you went under 500,000. Then you've got 500,000. Now, the most recent episode of Elevation is only around 250,000 views. It's extremely concerning for that. Mm-hmm. I've been a very big proponent that AEW aren't doing very well on their social media, especially YouTube. It's kind of lagging behind. So for Elevation is sitting at 263,000 views. Dark is 243,000, which is just continuing the trend of going down. Now, these are the shows that they are promoting as these are storyline shows. These shows do have sometimes do affect storylines going forward.
Right.
And we have seen that. We have seen things come from Dark. Or we've also seen people come from Dark. Hobbs started off as pretty much a jobber on Dark, and now he's, a badass. We've seen a whole heap of people.
Same with Solo.
Yeah. So I do need to give a little shout out. One of my favorite new factions is actually on Elevation Dark, which is the Pretty Boys made of Pretty Peter, Caesar, Ryan Nemeth and JD Drake. Those four guys together are just amazing, and I absolutely love them together. So even the dark guys and girls are getting into factions, you know. But when we look at the numbers of Dark, especially Dark itself. I tracked the numbers from 374,000 down to 290,000, and like I said, this week it's now at 243. It is just continually dropping, and the issue isn't the length. Like, the length isn't really. I don't know if the length is a factor, because when I look at the Twitter comments about it, a lot of people go, okay, cool, it's a length, it's a length, it's a length. I've looked at the lengths as well, and those episodes that were doing more are about the same size as Dark. So is it an interest in what's actually being shown, or are these just for the diehard fans that will watch these? Now, for other perceptions, I'm also looking right now at the videos that are from this week's Dynamite. Okay, so this week's Dynamite, we had about 800 odd thousand watch the episode. Now, let's have a look at a couple of videos. So we've got that video about Brian Cage beating Hangman. That's in at 120,000 views only. Chris Statlander versus Penelope Ford sitting at 33,000. We should
put into context, by the way, that the AEW YouTube channel has over 2 million subscribers.
Yeah, 2.13 million at this current moment. The biggest video was the end of the main event between Darby. So this is, I guess, more proof that he is a draw. That one's sitting at 429,000 views. So that is a good video, but that's the biggest video. All the others are about 200,000. Now, for an example, and I use this because their YouTube is really easy to use. It's really easy to find, but the WWE YouTube videos, they've got a fellow, and I think they're about 70 million. So look, it could be a bit unfair, but most people know that Raw is struggling at the moment. A lot of people are not fans of it. I've got a video here. Angel Garza presents flowers to Nia Jax. It lasts for 1 minute and 38 seconds. It is currently sitting at 555,000 views. Mm-hmm. If that's not, that to me is worrying, because if something like that can get that amount of views, and you've got the only thing on here that's getting anywhere that big close to that is one particular clip, and you see trends going down for Dark and Elevation. For me, social media is a massive market, and WWE have shown that they are getting videos of upwards of 1 million views. I remember a couple of weeks ago that the video from NXT of all the three new champions coming to NXT did over 1.25 million views. For me, that's showing growth, and it shows, okay, there's an interest, because people are actively coming on and watching these videos. That means that people are interested in this.
Yeah. So
when we have a look at how Dynamite and how AEW are doing on a YouTube specific thing, the War of the Worlds between Pinnacle and Inner Circle did 383,000, but everything else is just that the Orange Cassidy Penta only did 116,000. For me, it's just they seem to be struggling on their YouTube, and that to me shows that maybe they are struggling. I know that they're sort of designed as a TV company, that they want people to be watching the TV product, not the social media. However, WWE have shown that despite them only getting, they're in a bit of a downward trend sometimes with their ratings. However, their social media, they've still got a high interaction there and a high percentage, which means that they've still got a lot of people getting involved, talking about the product and buying merch and getting involved in the characters. Yeah. And that's what AEW really needs if they need to grow. And yeah, just for me, just with the numbers and with everything that I've been seeing, AEW is struggling very bad in that department.
So, as someone, me personally, who also runs a YouTube channel that is a series, over on General Admission Wrestling. My view counts obviously are nowhere near comparable to this, but there is a trend that I've noticed when you do a series on YouTube, that when you start, that's going to be your biggest number. And in the case of Elevation, the biggest number they've done is their first episode, and they advertise it on TV. I tuned in to watch it. I think a lot of casual fans did. Not saying I'm a casual fan, but I think a lot of casual fans did. And then what happens is after that, it starts to go down. And because every week you get people who just don't keep up with it. You get people who say, well, I've now missed 2 episodes, so what's the point? I'm not going to watch until a big thing happens or whatever. And so, you start losing viewers. They start coming away until eventually you stabilize, you bottom out at your loyal viewers, the people that are going to watch every episode that you do. That seems to me kind of what Dark is doing right now, that they're getting to that point where they're going to bottom out, and the 250 to 300,000 people that watch Dark every week, that's their audience that's going to watch every week. So what I want to ask, and I'm not arguing with you at all about whether or not this is concerning. I think this is actually concerning, but you brought up that AEW has said that they're a TV product. They want people to watch Dynamite. They were so big on getting that TV deal and bringing it to TNT, and that was such a big focus of AEW when they started, that I wonder if AEW is actually concerned about any of this that's going on. I do wonder if their social media is just a way to get people funneled in to watch the TV. And I'll give you an example. So when I was in college, I worked at a TV station in the college town that I went to. I went to the University of Kansas. So I worked at a TV station in town. And my senior year, the TV station switched. A new company bought it out. And the new company came in, and so I was talking to the people that own it and, talking about what's the business plan here? Are you going to hire me back? What are we going to do? And what I learned was this company that moved in also they were an internet service provider. Their TV station lost money. So I was getting paid and, we were putting on these shows and everything, but they were losing money. And so I asked the executive producer, why do we do this if we're losing money? And he goes, well, we're always going to lose money on this. The point is we're going to sell internet packages. So they were intentionally losing money so that they could make money in another part of this business. I wonder if AEW views social media the same way, specifically with Dark and Elevation. If they're thinking, we're going to lose money putting on these shows, but if we can get 200 to 300,000 loyal viewers and turn 50,000 of those people into loyal Dynamite viewers, if that is going to be worth it to lose money to put on these shows. I'm not saying that's what they're doing. I'm just floating that idea out there.
A lost leader is the term you were thinking of.
Yes, lost leader. Thank you.
Yeah, so Sean Ross Sapp from Fightful made a really good point about this, where it's for what he said is it's not about the views and that, it's about creating content to sell it to a streaming service. And that's awesome. That's what WWE has done. They have created content, they've sold it to Peacock for a massive amount of money, as this is the amount of content. So for me, yes, this is all concerning. From a viewer wise, from engagement wise, everything's going down. Everything's lowering down. Everything's less and less people are engaging with the product on social media. And I could sit here for days, and I would if I was allowed to, and talk about how important social media is for branding and everything like that, because that's I've had a long history with that. But for me, this is not about, and I agree with what he said, that this isn't about really that. It's more to create sort of, hey, look at all of this stuff we have. Mm-hmm. Would you like to buy it as a stream? Would you like to buy it as a streaming service and, get that other revenue? Because at the moment, obviously, your main revenue is from the TV product. You've got your merch and all that sort of stuff. But realistically, where's the revenue coming from? Streaming has taken over the world. Everyone has a streaming service most likely. I know I have several personally, um, including a subscription for AEW to watch it. But to sell it, to be able to sell it for massive bucks to a company, that's going to help promote the product and also have more access to it. But for me as well, during that is you've got to show that you've got the viewership for that. So that's the concerning part. But yeah, for me, I get what you're saying, and I do agree, impartial. But if you're doing it to just sell merch, it's all good. Because at the end of the day, they're paying these guys to be there regardless. So us getting to see some great matches, like I said, I watch this regularly. I love. There's a faction in there that I love. I follow them all. I interact with them all, and they're such a fun time to watch these four guys do their stuff. And I've grown in love with a whole lot of people, and seeing the match between seeing a lot of the girls and all that all wrestle, and just you're seeing them progressively get so much better. From when they started versus now. Danny Jordan is a massive one. She just had a match recently, and you can just see she's come full circle in her skills. And seeing that is really good as a fan. Because you get invested in these things. But the viewership is concerning with how far it's gone. I mean, Elevation's gone from that 1.165 down to now only the 263, and it's just dropping extremely fast. Dark, I would give saying that maybe it is towards this plateau. This is the number, because it's been sitting around that 250 to 290,000 the last 3 weeks now. So this might be the actual number, but it has been going downhill progressively for a few months now. So yeah, look, it's something that I'm going to be watching. I'm going to be talking more about it. But yeah, the YouTube is a market that they should be tapping into, but I don't know if they want to, or I don't know if they know how to, but it's definitely something that is. And this is the funny thing, because if we all remember, the entire reason that the Young Bucks and that got over was because of BTE, which is an internet YouTube show. You'd think that they'll know how to do this, and even BTE is going downhill in views. It's massively gone down from like 300,000 to maybe 100 to 200,000 views since Brody passed. So yeah, look, it's all, for me, it's concerning, because it just means that there's lack of engagement outside of what's on TV.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sergi, when you look at this, there's, we've asked questions about what kind of company is AEW, what would their goal be. I think Anthony brings up a good point brought up by Sean Ross Sapp, which I wonder if he actually has addressed, but AEW has their TV deal with TNT. TNT, a Turner product, is, I believe, under the CBS umbrella, so I wonder what the deal is there, if Paramount would have a right to stream that, since Paramount Plus just launched, and that's a CBS product. So you can get really into the weeds when it comes to streaming rights and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
If you are AEW looking at this, are you concerned? Are you thinking about maybe we need to change course here, or do you feel like it's you're kind of being a loss leader? Like, it doesn't matter what this stuff is doing. There's kind of a greater purpose behind this. I mean, how do you feel about this right now?
I think that the feeling I get from everything I hear about Dark is that a lot of it is pushed by wanting to give people the opportunity to get their reps in, wanting to give people opportunities, and less of a focus on the overall quality of the show. I think that there is stuff that they could leave on the cutting room floor and say, you got your reps in, you got paid, you're not getting exposure this time, get better. Next time you'll actually be on the YouTube show. There could be a Dark for Dark, and Dark Elevation and Dark, they don't have enough that distinguish them besides different announce teams for it to make sense for that to be two separate shows.
I totally agree.
When they announced Dark Elevation, I really thought that there was going to be something really different about it in terms of there would be some kind of a gimmick where we're bringing top level guys like Jungle Boy in to fight the guys that are on the dark level, and if they win, they get a contract. There'll be some kind of a gimmick there, and there was it's just then the biggest thing I think for me, the thing that makes me say, oh yeah, that's not even worth watching, is the abundance of random tag teams. They'll put together these matches, and the established team would just get as their opponent two jobbers, as opposed to I'm not saying that they shouldn't get a jobber team, but it should be a jobber team and not just a team of two jobbers. If you're seeing the distinction I'm making,
yeah.
I find that for me, because I am such a big fan of AEW and their storylines, I find Dark and Dark Elevation worth skimming through to see what's not skippable in them, or checking out the highlights of them. But I can't sit through all that. And that's just me.
No,
but I'm sure a lot of people feel similarly, and some people ignore it completely. Although I know that there are the diehards who watch all of their YouTube shows and their network show religiously every week.
So
as well.
I do think the length is a problem, and I agree with Anthony that there's not a direct correlation. I mean, you can't there's not a 1-to-1 like the longest shows do the least viewers, something like that. That doesn't really exist. However, I consider myself to be in the middle of the casual versus hardcore kind of line chart, if you will. If you were to graph it out, I think me personally, I would land right in the middle, just because I create a lot of videos for YouTube. That's what I spend a lot of my time doing. So I don't watch every single minute of Dark and Elevation. I don't watch BTE, but I do watch every minute of Dynamite, and usually I watch half the show more than once. And I follow what's going on. So I consider myself to be in the middle. And the length is a real turnoff for me. Like, I just see this unbelievable, like, it's Elevation now, 3 or maybe 4 out of its 6 shows have been 2 hours or more. And it's like, I cannot watch a show that long. I mean, it's just not going to happen. And even to the point where I'm like, I don't even think it's worth skimming through. Now, obviously, there
are gems, though. There really are.
Oh, yeah. No. You're absolutely right.
Paul White is really very good on color, and there's stuff worth. But yeah, you got to dig, because sitting through the whole thing, I couldn't.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. What I think AEW should consider doing, and this is just coming from me, who I create stuff on YouTube, and I love to kind of go through these thought experiments about, what series could we do, what might work, kind of get those creative juices flowing a little bit. What I would like to see AEW do is exactly what you said, Sergi. I would love to see them add a gimmick to Elevation. Maybe it is, fighting for a contract. Maybe it's like a 4-week rolling thing where, over the course of 4 weeks, we're going to have this tournament where the winner gets a contract, and you can get almost like the original NXT, but, less wacky, like a lot more serious, like the Ultimate Fighter, but for wrestling. That's what I'm thinking of.
Right. With like points and people putting it up on the screen, like this is where people are ranking, and this is what you've got to do if you want to take the lead. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
exactly. I would love to see something like that.
Some kind of overarching storyline.
Exactly. And if it's not that, then maybe they say, Dark is like 2 hours, and it's all of these people, that are training. It's members of the Nightmare Factory. It's, whoever. And that's what's going on Dark. And if it's 2 hours, it's 2 hours. But Elevation is the much tighter, more produced. It's like an hour long or less. I mean, preferably, I think it would be like 45 minutes. Kind of like when NXT was at its prime, what a lot of fans would consider its prime in terms of quality was when it was like 45 minutes once a week on the network, because that 45 minutes was the best stuff that you will get. and it was all condensed down into one short burst, kind of like what NXT UK does now. I would like to see from AEW, because if you're aiming to put it on a streaming service, if you go to a streaming service and say, we got this 45-minute show of some of our best up-and-coming wrestlers, maybe some indie showcases, now that the Forbidden Door is open, hell, bring in guys from New Japan Strong, bring in some Young Lions, bring in people from Impact, maybe bring in people from MLW, maybe. I mean, we haven't seen anyone from there yet, but those connections do exist. Lots of guys from AEW have come from there. So if you say we're going to put that in a 45-minute program, it's going to be tight, it's going to be well-produced, and it's once a week, I would watch the hell out of that. I would watch that every week, absolutely. But the length is just it's too much for me to feel like I need to watch it every week. The idea of skimming it is like, it's I knew if I did it, and I have done it before, if I do it, then I'll do it and enjoy it. But it's almost like I don't want to do it because it's going to take so long. You know what I mean? So that's what I would
homework.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I would like to see from specifically Elevation. Like, give it a purpose.
I'll just mention this. You're probably not going to see MLW. It looks like it's been reported heavily that WWE are in talks with a partnership with MLW. So you're probably not going to see MLW. Most observers said that they're in heavy talks with them at the moment. So they probably might be going the way. Apparently it's going to be sort of like what they were doing with Evolve, where they were having some talent go down there. So it looks like that might be the direction. Look, for me, when I first heard about Elevation, I thought it was you're going to get 3 to 4 matches. It was going to be no more than an hour. It was going to be nice and tight with maybe I really do enjoy the interviews that they're doing. They do like a Rising Star interview. This week they had Layla Hirsch, and it was fantastic. I loved it. I do like that. So maybe, you have 2 matches, you have that interview, then you have 2 matches, that will be nice, but, and then Dark, you can just leave because Dark is Dark. I do enjoy Dark. Dark has given us some really great storylines. It gave us the storyline between Pretty Peter Avalon and what's his name, the new Young Bucks best friend, Brandon
Cutler.
Yeah, Cutler. Yeah. So they had that non-winning streak match, which was very invested. You've had Fuego del Sol getting over his tornado, finally landing a tornado DDT. These are little stories that can only happen in the Dark Universe. So I want to leave that where it is. Yeah. However, the length time is something that it needs to be discussed, because let's just look at the week of the 13th of the 4th, 12th of the 4th week. If you were to watch Dark, Elevation, and Dynamite, that's 6 hours. Not include anything else that you're doing in your week. 6 hours of wrestling.
It's too much.
That's not including if you watch NXT, not including if you watch Raw, not including if you watch SmackDown, not including anything else that you might want to watch. It's 6 hours of wrestling from start to finish, and you're right, it is too much. I would make a suggestion here.
Maybe, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if AEW just says, look, we don't expect anyone to watch every single minute of content we put out. It's unrealistic. If they said that, fine. I mean, that's totally fine. But what I would like to see them do then is maybe on Dynamite, you just take I don't know, a minute and a half. You take 90 seconds or less, maybe 30 to 60 seconds, and you just say, here is a select highlight or 2 from Dark or from Elevation. You should go back and watch this match. Or here's a wrestler you should keep an eye on that you should watch when they're on Dark or Elevation, so that you can get this massive viewership that watches Dynamite to go over and watch the specific parts of Dark and Elevation that they want you to see, so you never feel like I have to watch this entire thing. Because my problem is, if I only watch Dynamite, AEW doesn't tell me what I should and shouldn't be watching. So when I see an hour and a half episode of Dark or a 2-hour episode of Elevation, I'm sitting here like, what the hell in here am I going to watch? Because AEW hasn't told me what I'm supposed to watch. So I think if they do that, I would be much more likely to go to that video and watch it. And then maybe if it's right in the middle of the episode, I'll just be like, you know what? Damn, that was really good. I'm going to leave this on and I'm going to watch the rest of it. You know what I mean? I would love to see them do something like that.
A recap show would be absolutely fantastic, like a studio show, kind of like
Yeah.
Power.
Oh, that would be great.
Promos and recaps of notable things throughout the week.
That would be fantastic. Another thing I probably would watch if they did that, especially because they have so many great characters in AEW. Like if you had Jericho doing that, like Jericho in studio just like ranting about random stuff that happened on Dark and Elevation, like I would watch that just for him. You know what I mean? So, just I think what all three of us are kind of zeroing in on is the need for there to be something, just something there for us to watch. And from Anthony's perspective, there is something there that people should be watching. So then I would say I need to be told about it. I think AEW is very quick to make an assumption that I know things that are going on, and I don't. I think I speak for a fairly large percentage of the audience. I don't watch everything they put on YouTube. I'm not on social media very much. I don't see the kinds of things that AEW does that I think they assume I see. So from their perspective, I do think they should do a better job of intertwining all of these things so that I can go watch what they tell me to watch. Give me that the goodwill that Dynamite has bought from me, has earned. Use that to then push me over to go watch other things. If someone on Dynamite tells me to go watch something, because Dynamite is such a great product, I will go watch that just because they told me to. They've earned that from me. So I would like to see them do that.
I think that when they introduce something from Dark and it's sort of graduating to Dynamite, that they do a pretty good job of recapping what you may have missed if you haven't been watching the YouTube shows. But it's telling and not showing it. I admit that, but that's got to be a part of it when something makes that leap.
Hey, you're speaking my language there when it comes to TV. You got to show, don't tell, and it's an eternal lesson in TV. And sometimes Dynamite does do a little bit of telling. They tell me things on Dark. So like Red Velvet got her start on Dark. And I think she was jobbing on Dark a lot, and then she started winning, and she was part of a big feud with Cargill, and obviously a huge match with Shaq and everything. Like, that's great. And they explained to me, hey, Red Velvet came from Dark, she was doing all this, and she's really improved. I'm like, you know what? That's fantastic. What I would have preferred is that in November of 2020, you just told me that that's what she was doing, and you were like, hey, there's Red Velvet. She is this exciting prospect on Dark. You got to go watch her. I would have gone and watched her, and then I'd feel a lot more invested in having seen her, because I imagine anyone who was watching Dark while Red Velvet was on it, seeing that growth that Anthony alluded to, they feel really invested in the character, that now that she's up on Dynamite doing all this great stuff, they're like, hey, I knew about her from when she was jobbing on Dark 3 months ago. I want to have that experience, you know what I mean? So I want AEW to tell me to go have that experience.
I hear you. I definitely do feel that way about Will Hobbs, because he was jobbing on Dark before it got too long to watch, and that definitely was someone that I had immediately, when they started bringing in new people, he was one of the people that a lot of people, and I was one of them, picked out as this guy's a future star.
Mm-hmm.
When he was just jobbing.
So it's a perfect example is someone that I talk about, and you guys thought I couldn't figure out a way to fit him in again, but I did. Anthony Ogogo. We're going to talk about him again because I knew about him from 2012 when he was in the Olympics, but it's the exact same thing, right? I knew who he was, and so as soon as he gets to AEW, and he did a little bit of commentary and stuff, actually on Dark, one of the few episodes of Dark that I did watch, that Ogogo was doing commentary, and I was like, hey, this guy, you could tell he's got a personality, and I knew from knowing him in the Olympics, I know that he's got the athleticism, and obviously now we know everything that we do know about him and how much he looks like a star and all the rest. So that kind of experience, that it's like you not that you know them personally, but that you are personally invested in what they're doing because you feel like you as a viewer have grown with them. That is the kind of thing that AEW can do, that now I think WWE, just to take an example, has basically shut down, because their decision to make NXT the third brand has removed any ability for them to say that here's someone who rose from the bottom of NXT to now becoming WWE champion. Something like when Finn Balor did it, it was so rewarding for so many fans that followed his journey. WWE basically shut that down by turning NXT into that third brand. Well, AEW can do that. If they just tell me, here is someone you should watch, and then maybe I'll get invested in them, but maybe I'll get invested in the person they're fighting and watch that growth happen. There's so many possibilities there that I think AEW should focus on tightening things up and giving me as a casual viewer a reason to watch this product that goes up on YouTube. So it's not just this random collection of matches that shows up in my subscription feed every Monday and Tuesday.
It seems so random, those matches. That obviously there are some good matches on Dark. When I've tuned in and I pick out the ones like that's got at least one person I really like in it. Like I watched JD Drake's first match because it was with Eddie Kingston, and it's like that was a fantastic match, and I was very glad that I picked that one out. But yeah, the whole assortment of matches is just like, who are all these people? How am I supposed to, absorb all this at once? It's pretty overwhelming. It's like a what's that term? It's just an overload.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's too much, I think, for a casual fan to really wrap their head around it. Anthony, you're obviously the one that wrote this article, and you had all this analysis and everything. So I will give you the final word on this. For AEW, let's talk about, say, 1 year or 2 years in the future. Are Dark and Elevation, in your opinion, going to continue to look like this, or does there need to be and will be changes by that time?
I'm not sure. Couple of very easy fixes. Elevation, shorten it to an hour. Like we spoke about, shorten it to an hour, 3 to 4 matches, four matches, and a sit-down interview, maybe some matches with stakes. Great, fantastic. Dark, keep as is. However, an easy fix for Dark is to put timestamps for which matches are on and when they start, so you can instantly skip to them. There is someone in the comments who does it, but AEW should be doing it, and it should be in their description of it. They're very quick, easy fixes. A lot more people would be tuning in if they're like, okay, cool, I want to go and watch this thing. Oh, what's on here? Okay, cool, I can see all the matches, and when they are, I'm going to go watch the match that I want. I don't want to be having to scroll through everything in order to find the specific match. So, and their listing of matches don't even, it doesn't even, it's not even in order sometimes. With Elevation, they need to be advertising what's actually on the card. Same with Dark. Some of the Elevation matches are being promoted by the wrestlers themselves, not even by the AEW social media. So that's just you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot at the start. So look, there's some things that they need to change, and some very quick, easy changes to make the viewing experience better. I want to leave Dark as it is. I do, even though the numbers are concerning. I think that Dark is a really good place for people to work on their characters, for people to work on their getting those reps in and to rise. So you'd have, for me, I see Dark as your tier 1. That's where you're getting your start.
Yeah.
Elevation is your tier 2. Then Dark is your main. That's what I'd be doing. So you'd
Dynamite,
go,
you mean?
the idea, Dynamite. Yeah. So your idea is that you'd have a wrestler come from Dark, go up through to Elevation, do some stuff on Elevation, and they don't need to work every week. They can just work, a match here, a match there, get those really impressive wins up, and then move on to Elevation, onto Dark. Now, with these two shows, even though they're not watched, they influence everything in regards to Dynamite, because where do you think SCU and Britt Baker, they're both now number 1 top contenders. Yeah. Where do you think all of their matches, all their wins came from?
Right. It wasn't from Dynamite, Dark and Elevation.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And SCU are now 0-11. Before this promo this week, and if you didn't look at that social media of, seeing the numbers announced, would you have known that? You know, these
No.
matches have exactly, and that's what they're missing. So yeah, look, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. In regards to it, it's not as good. It's not as clean as I'd like it. And yeah, some context on Dynamite, linking back to these shows to show that they're important, or that there's people that are important, saying, "Oh, hey, SCU are on a hot streak at the moment. They're fighting this week. They're currently 0-9. They've won 9 straight. You should go check them out on Dynamite. On Dark.
Yeah.
Linking back to someone. They're very easy fixes that can be done. But I guess that comes back to the conversation that we're having before. Do AEW care? And at this point, we don't know.
Well, and it was a great question regarding whether what's going to happen a year from now, and it leaves open the question of that's not even considering that there's still talk that there's going to be a second 1-hour network show that they're going to be working in.
Well, I wondered if Elevation was kind of the trial run for that, right? And like when it first started, I was wondering, is this the program they were talking about? That has been rumored now for a long time that they're going to bring in this hour of TV, and then the first episode of Elevation is 2 hours, and I'm like, okay, it's the first one, whatever, it's going to be longer, and then every subsequent episode of Elevation is an hour and a half or longer, and most of them are over 2, and it's like, no, I don't think this is what the experiment was supposed to be, which I'm a little disappointed by, because if it's on TV, I'll probably watch it, because AEW put it on. That's my whole point. If AEW does it, I will probably watch it. But Dark and Elevation are so long, it precludes casual viewers from even getting into it.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's another thing is they may look at it as just this is something for hardcore fans and for, as Anthony pointed out, for building people's stats. It exists for that, and if people aren't watching it, whatever. When we make our 1-hour show, it's going to be tight and it's going to be must-see. And if that's the perspective, well, that third hour, I'll watch it, and we'll see how different that ends up being.
The other thing that I would point out is once AEW gets back to touring, I would imagine
Good point.
that either Dark or Elevation, or possibly both, would maybe stay in Daly's place, or stay at like some permanent facility where it always broadcasts from, which would cut down presumably the costs. And so maybe it's much less of a loss to AEW that, even if they're not doing a ton of viewers on YouTube, it's still worth it. Just from the perspective of getting wrestlers TV time. Like AEW might look at this and say, we'll do 2 hours of Dark from this facility that we own that costs nothing to run. We'll pay these wrestlers to work it, but we're probably going to pay them something anyway. And if even one of them turns out to be a big star that sells us a lot of merchandise and does big numbers on TV, it becomes worth it retroactively. If it just so happens that we have the next MJF, the next Cody Rhodes, the next Kenny Omega, if it so happens that we happen to have the next one that is able to work these shows, maybe it's Anthony Ogogo. Got it for the third time, Anthony Ogogo reference.
Lol.
My point is, if it happens to be, if there's a next in there, then it's worth it. Whatever we got to pay, it's worth it. So, maybe that's what they're thinking as well. It's like a long-term decision for them.
For building new stars, absolutely. That's a big part of it too.
I mean, there is an advantage for AEW for keeping everyone in-house, right? I think the number of people that, the people that created AEW basically all came from New Japan, except for Cody, who got his start obviously in WWE. So from them, I think they came from a place where New Japan likes to keep everyone in-house if possible, right? They love to use their dojo guys, and their big stars, a lot of them came from the dojos. So New Japan very much believes in doing it this way. AEW is a bunch of guys who did not come from that route. They ended up in New Japan, and they obviously were not happy with how things got at the end of that whole relationship. But maybe there is something about that system that they like, and so they're kind of thinking, let's do it our way. Let's keep these guys away from the big indies. Like, we don't want these guys to be working Impact or MLW or Ring of Honor or New Japan or something like that permanently. We want these guys to be here in AEW, so they might find value in keeping all of their guys in-house for as long as possible, so that, again, if that next big star is there, they have him or her, and they don't have to worry about that person potentially leaving, because that person will be loyal to AEW. Kind of like the Factory storyline playing out in real life. The fact that we want to keep people loyal to the company, so that if it turns out we have the next big superstar, they're not going to leave. I think Brock Lesnar in WWE is a perfect example. Someone who was loyal to WWE, so that's why he did his work there. When he left, he did his short stint in New Japan, and then when he came back, it was WWE, and whether it's the money or whatever, he just hasn't considered leaving, and that's as big a star as you'll ever find in wrestling. So maybe that enters their mind as well.
Yeah, definitely possible.
Well, we've gone about the length of your average Elevation episode here on this particular podcast.
Perhaps we should apply some of our criticisms to ourselves.
You know what? I think you're absolutely right. It's much easier said than done. But I mean, you know me. When you get started on Anthony Ogogo, that's when things just go off the rails. I mean, we know how it is. So again, we say it every time. Really appreciate everyone coming here to watch this, to listen along with us. If you're on Spotify, if you're on Apple, wherever you may be, thank you so much for being here and hanging out with us. We always have a great time doing these. I hope that really comes through, because we enjoy doing this stuff so much. So I hope that you guys listening also enjoy it. So we will leave you with, of course, where you find these guys. We'll start with Sergi. Where can the people find you, my friend?
Well, I will generally tweet about my latest Styles Makes Fights column, but that's the main thing that I contribute, is the Styles Makes Fights column, generally weekly on ProWrestlingMusings.com.
Yes, and you should read that, because we always discuss it on this podcast, and it's always a great read. So always read that. Anthony.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anthony, my friend from Down Under, where can the people find you?
Riding a kangaroo around, because that's how we do transport here in Australia.
That's what I thought.
When we're trying to run away from the drop bears, that is. Although they only target tourists, so we're generally fine. I'm on Twitter more than I'd like, hanging around there. So you can find me on Anthony Down Under on there. I'm also do writing for the website as well, which, like I said, it's mainly about social media stuff, because that's what I am interested in. So also go read Sergi's Styles Makes Fights. I personally also love reading it, and also huge shout out to yourself, Griff, for your latest video on the Dark Order. It was absolutely amazing. So people should definitely go and watch that as well.
Well, I do appreciate that, and of course.
That is a really good point, Anthony. I think that you do not give yourself enough shout-outs on this podcast. Everybody check out the YouTube channel for Pro Wrestling Musings, because it always has great content, mostly from you, Griff.
I very much appreciate that, and I will leave with reminding you two and everyone else that the latest Dark Order video was actually Anthony's idea, so sure. Anthony gets to take credit for that particular video. All I did was just croak into a microphone for a few minutes. Anyone can do it, but I do appreciate both of you for being here and for your kind words. And for anyone who's interested in hearing more from me, you can go find me either on the Pro Wrestling Musings YouTube channel if you're not already there, or over on my personal channel at General Admission Wrestling. So once again, Thank you all so much for joining us here. It really means a lot to all of us, and we hope that we will see you again next week when we're talking blood and guts with the creator of Pro Wrestling Musings, Craig. I can't wait to have him back on to talk certainly what's going to be one of the most memorable matches in AEW history. So thanks again so much. Subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, all that good stuff that you know to do. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.